This is the BAM School Podcast, where we talk about business adventure and mission with your host, Buddy Rathmel.
Hi there, and welcome to the BAM School Podcast. I'm Buddy Rathmel, and I have a guest with me today, Scott Jacobson. Scott and I met online, and then we had a phone call last Saturday, and I thought it'd be great to have him on the podcast just to talk about some of the things that he's involved in. Thought it'd be a fun conversation. So Scott has started a nonprofit with his wife and some others in Indianapolis called the Son Foundation, and we'll get into that. He is a CPA and is also part of a real estate investing syndication, and we'll dive into that as well, and loves to travel and serve and a lot of the same things that I enjoy. So I just thought it'd be a fun podcast to have him on. So Scott, welcome to the BAM School Podcast.
Thank you, Buddy. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm excited to have this conversation today because all the things you just mentioned are things I love talking about and love doing. So love to share some stories.
Yeah. So give our listeners just a 60 to 90 second background on you, where you grew up, school, family, all those kind of things.
Sure. Well, let's see. Going way back, I'm originally from a small town. Grew up kind of on the intersection of two gravel roads in northern Illinois, surrounded by cornfields and bean fields. And when came time to go to college, I went to Indianapolis. It brought me to Indianapolis, which is where I still live, to a small private college called Butler University. I think I was the first one from my college or from my high school to go to that college. So I didn't know anybody, but it turned out being one of, if not the best decisions I've made in my life, because it was an incredible experience. Met some incredible people. Met my wife there. Although we met in college, but we didn't start dating until we were both a year or two or three out of college. She makes fun of me for that because I had an opportunity to ask her out when at some point during when we were both in college, and I passed on it because I guess I thought I was too busy. But yeah, been married for almost 20 years. I think this year is 19 this is 20. We got married in 2024, or we got married in 2004. So this is 20 years. We got one child. He's 14 in high school. And as a family, we love to travel. That's kind of our thing when we have the opportunity to do so. Love watching my kid play sports and just hanging out, good friends and family. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. So where are some of your favorite places to travel to, or where are some of the favorite places you've been?
Great question. Probably my best experience was out of the blue. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to study abroad. But as a college sophomore, I went to Australia for a semester, spent a little over 5 months there, going to school. But every opportunity I had, including every weekend but one, and several 1 or 2 week trips during the semester, just got to explore the country, almost the entirety of the country. Met some incredible people, saw some great things.
What city were you based in?
Townsville, which is northeast corner, kind of off the Great Barrier Reef. So I spent a lot of time, I say kind of because it's not easy access. It's like an overnight boat ride to get to the actual reef. But I did spend a lot of time scuba diving on the Great Barrier Reef and enjoying the sunshine there.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity.
Our family went to Australia once, and then I went back 4 times, either to teach or with students from my BAM school, and always loved it. I say I really like Aussies because they're like positive like New Yorkers, but they're kind like people from Mississippi. So
I love it. That's a great description. Yeah, I loved my experience there. My son wants to go back, so he wants to go. So we may end up there again someday, or maybe he'll get to study abroad like I did.
It's a great place. Language is easy. You can get around, figure everything out. So it's the flight that's a little bit of a bugger getting there. But
I still remember there was a girl as part of our group flying over there together. We left on February 10th, And because of you crossed the date line, we arrived on February 12th, and her birthday was February 11th. So she's like, I didn't get my birthday this year.
She
But it
totally
is, yeah,
missed it.
it's a long flight from the eastern half of the U.S.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you got involved in real estate investing in the Indianapolis market.
Sure. So from a professional standpoint, real estate is my passion. It started maybe in a strange way. I'm a CPA, and I started out of college as working at a Big Four public accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, back when there was an Arthur Andersen before the Enron
Yeah.
debacle blew that up. But the guy who was assigned randomly, I suppose, as my mentor, when we got together, we didn't talk about accounting. We talked about real estate because he was big into, and still is, big into single family rental properties. And so he was the first one that really kind of blew my mind, because before that, as a whatever I was, 22-year-old, I literally had no idea that you could own a house or a building or anything that you didn't live in or work in. I just, that wasn't
Yeah.
part of my history at that point. So I remember driving around with him at some point. It's like, yeah, I own that house and that one over there is mine. And I just remember thinking, like, how can you not be like screaming this from the rooftops? Like, I would be so, I don't know how I could control myself if I could point to a house and say I own that, but I don't live in it, right? And so that was the
Yeah.
first kind of mind expanding opportunity that I had. So he was the first one that told me to think about it. There's a book
Yeah.
called Rich Dad Poor Dad that many people have read, and at least in the real estate world, and that book literally changed my financial life, because it helped me realize that there's a great way to invest that involves real estate, and to kind of think of even the home that we live in, think of it differently, not necessarily as an asset, but maybe as a liability, because it's our
Yeah.
money paying for it rather than a tenant's money, paying the
Right.
mortgage, that kind of thing. So
I had kind of a similar experience when I was a kid. I was probably 13 or 14 when I was at my friend's house, and his older sister asked their mom if they could go to Paris to go shopping for the weekend. And I was just like, I understood people going to Europe to go on vacation, but like just to hop on a plane to go shopping for the weekend, I was like, that is a different level. And I knew they owned the first Woolworths building in Watertown, New York, and a big apartment complex and a house on a lake and a parking lot in New York City. And I knew real estate was like the thing that was funding this trip. And so when I tried to buy a house in college, and just for a number of reasons didn't work out. But as soon as I got out, I bought a small apartment building with my wife, and was just like, yeah, real estate is a really good way to go. It's just like you said, if you do it right and it's an asset and not a liability. And like one of the cool things is, like, with the internet, people are making ways where their primary home is still an asset. Like um, even ours, like we have a lady that lives above the garage that pays most of the bills. Um, when we bought that first apartment building, we lived in it, so we were getting a little cash flow, living for free, having the tax write off. So there's ways, even if you're smart, that you can even make that first one an asset, which is it's really cool. And like you said, it just takes a little bit of shifting your mind of like, okay, how do I do this? And that's cool that guy um, and Rich Dad Poor Dad were that for you. Actually, my
absolutely.
first job, I got hired into a company by Arthur Andersen, the consultant side, not the accounting side. Um, I was working for a Fortune 500, and they like hired me into the company, so that was kind of fun to connect with them for a bit. So
Very cool.
yeah. So you had that mind shift. How did a lot of people have that thought, oh, I should get real estate, but probably for every like 50 people that think it, maybe two people actually do it. So how did you go from thinking it to doing it?
That's such a great point. And it's something I've thought of as well since then. I remember at one point I asked my mentor there, who got me into thinking about real estate, and he's since become a partner. We bought 6 or 8 houses together. But at one point I asked him, how many people did you did you tell? I wasn't the only one that you suggested should go into real estate. And he said, oh, maybe a dozen, give or take. And I said, oh, that's awesome. How many of them are, doing it? And he's like, well, I think you're the only one.
Wow.
And that really made me think, wonder, what was it about me? And I think for me, I've always had a little bit of the entrepreneurial mindset, of when I was younger. I had the opportunity to have my own lawn service. At the time, my dad owned a lawnmower sales business and service business, so I had access to a lawnmower. But I took that business and I built it and ran with it, and I loved it, kind of being my own boss and set my own schedule a little bit. So when I found out that you could have real estate, it really it bit me. It was a bug that bit me. And the first house that I bought, I really just lucked into it because it was right next to the Butler University where I went to school. And it was a friend of mine who was a pharmacy major, which is a 6-year program. And her dad had bought it for her to live in along with some friends while she was, finishing up the last few years of her school. And when she graduated, her dad just wanted out of it what he had into it. And to his credit, he let me, a 22-year-old kid, buy it from him. And at that point, I did just what you were talking about. I had some friends who live with me. I was kind of house hacking before it was a thing, certainly before I knew it was a thing, but just helped me pay the bills. And I got to live there fairly rent free. And we had a lot of fun, living as young adults with a paycheck, but come home and we felt like college kids again because we were living on the college campus. So, but it was that. And then I thought, 1 is great. I'll bet 2 is greater. And if 2 is great, then, 4 or 6. And it was funny. I thought it would be more difficult to scale up a little bit. But in a lot of ways, I found that scaling up was a little, having 4 or 6 houses was almost easier than 1 or 2 because, you have a bad day or a bad month on one property, with a little luck, some of the other ones can carry that load and, make up for it. And you get a little scale going. It's actually a little bit easier to manage. At least it was for me. And I did manage them on my own.
Yeah. And so were you a buy and hold? Were you flipping? What was your primary, thing in real estate?
Buy and hold. And tried to find opportunities where could buy and fix up and hold to when you can buy kind of the ugliest house on the best block, or, a house that hasn't been updated in a few decades. There's some opportunity there to come in, do the work, and then make it a lot nicer. And then from a rental standpoint, it's pretty obvious. Then people are probably going to want to be willing to pay a little bit more to rent there, to live there, right? So that was what I did, and buy and hold. I've still got 4 of the first 5 houses I bought that I've had for almost 22 years now.
Nice.
Certainly, to be sure, some of them I've sold over the years. Sold a lot more than I've kept, but it's always rent for a while. I never got into the just buy and fix up and flip within a couple months. That kind of thing I've always held, and I think there's a lot of tax advantages, or there are a lot of tax advantages to do that as well. Not to mention the the cash flow on a monthly basis with a little luck.
Yeah, we were. When we bought our first one, there were some things like I didn't know as we jumped in. Like I was 23, I didn't have anyone. I should have had somebody older help me think through it because at the last, the realtor had folded closing costs in, and I didn't know anything about that. Just how they were operating everything, and so I left a little on the table just in the original buy, but it still was a great, a great thing overall. And we kind of contemplated, do we just do this for 5 years, buy another building every year? Cause we were both working and had really good jobs. And then we felt like at that time we were supposed to go to Japan. And so it's been interesting as I've come back to the States. I'm like, well, real estate is going to be my backup thing if business doesn't take off. But I just turned 50 a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, I don't know if I really want to get into, and we renovated the place that I'm in. So we just spent a year living and renovating in the same house. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to do the, like, if I did get a place, I think I'd get a place already kind of up to snuff that I could rent out right away. But
Well,
what have
I
been
will
what have been
say,
some of the hard things for you in real estate?
yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking as well. I decided almost right from the beginning that I didn't want a second or a third job. So I've always thought it's worth my time and my money to hire out
Yeah.
when maintenance needs to be done, when renovations need to be done. I always have hired that out, A, because I'm not as handy as I wish I were, but my time is valuable as well to me. So I'd rather be being able to come home to my family, or back then it was hanging out with friends. But I thought if I can pay someone else to do it, they're going to get done a lot quicker. They're probably going to do it a lot better.
Right.
And in investing in real estate, kind of time is money as well.
Yeah.
So that was one kind of lesson learned that I decided right up front. I'm not going to do the work. I'm going to try to make sure that they're self-supporting and can hire professionals. But honestly, the toughest part for me is probably, maybe it sounds bad, but it's just the people.
Yeah. No.
Sometimes tenants are great and we have a great relationship. Sometimes it's just no matter what you do, you can't make people happy. So that maybe leads to the most stress for me, is just trying to make sure, because I always have a mindset that I want to be able to drive by, whether it's a house or an apartment building, office building. I want to drive by and be happy and be proud of what I see. I don't want to.
Right.
I'm not a slumlord. I don't have the stomach for that.
Yeah.
I want to be take a lot of pride in making it nice, and I want people to really enjoy living there. I think that's important. So finding the right people to live in there, and then to make the houses nice, the apartments nice. That's the biggest stressor for me, is getting that right.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that's changed in the last 20 years is, especially right now in today's market, it's kind of hard to buy a house and make it cash flow as a single family rental, like just right off the bat. So doing something different, like a lot of people are getting into, Airbnbs or their mobile home parks, or just something that's like, it's going to cash flow quicker, better. And one of the things that works really well, probably in Indy, I know it works well here too, is just rent by room, where people take a house, make it nice, maybe nicer than it was. All the utilities are paid, the Wi-Fi is paid, and they come in either, short-term rental or week to week or month to month or whatever. But then in Roanoke, the numbers are such that it's usually about twice the cash flow. On the same property. Your expenses are a little more because you're paying utilities and Wi-Fi and some cleaning, but I'm sorry, twice top line revenue, often like 4 times cash flow. And so I know a couple ladies here in Roanoke that are financially free with 4 homes each that are basically paid off, or the mortgage is really low. But you put 4 or 5 people in a place that are each paying $1,000 a month, and you don't have that much of a mortgage, and utilities aren't that high, and it doesn't take a whole lot. One of them is in Costa Rica all winter, and she has a VA that kind of manages it, people that come in and do the stuff. And so that was just kind of cool to see that, like, okay, things have changed. Everyone knows they should be in real estate. Some people are jumping into it. And so there's different ways that you can do where you don't have the stress of managing it, or you are making more cash flow, or, and the cool thing with like Twitter and YouTube and books, like when we were, when you and I were first thinking about real estate, it was like, some books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, No Money Down for the 90s. I remember when I was buying my apartment building, and, but I think like just a little bit of investment and knowledge, and you can pick a path that's, pretty good for you. So any other like thoughts on your personal real estate investing?
For me, I just know it's been, if looking back now, if I just go straight from where I am to 20 years ago. Like I never would have dreamed that I would be here, that I would have kind of made a second career, actually a better career financially out of the real estate than out of my being a CPA work.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. It's a lot more fun to think about than accounting, to be honest. But it's just offered an incredible amount of opportunities that never would have, dared to think that I would have had, 20 years ago, just getting into this. And especially when I think how random it seemed to be that I got assigned a mentor at a public accounting firm, and we didn't talk about accounting. We talked about real estate. So I owe that person a lot for literally changing the trajectory of my life. I just know it's been great for me, for my family, and given us a lot of opportunities.
That's really cool. So tell me about the Son Foundation. How did you guys, how did you get that vision? Where did all that come from? How to get started? Well, first, actually, tell people what you do, and then go back and tell me how you got started.
Sure. The Son Foundation is a 501c3 charity, a full nonprofit charity that my wife and I started back in, I think it was 2012. And like a lot of things, it was kind of born out of not necessity, but out of a low point, because at that point my wife was a teacher, a fourth grade teacher, and she job shared with her best friend, name is Tiffany, and together they were fourth grade teachers. And about 3/4 of the way through that school year, Tiffany was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Had to take the rest of the year off, or did take the rest of the year off, started going through treatment, trying to figure out what's going to be, what's the path forward. And some of my finished the year, and then they both took the school corporation allowed them a sabbatical the next school year to figure out, kind of for Tiffany, of course, to go through treatments and get better. And then my wife was trying to figure out, well, what's she going to do now? Is she going to go back to teaching full time, or is she going to go a different route altogether? And at some point, she volunteered with the Ronald McDonald House here in Indianapolis, which is just it's a place where children who are patients can stay, or the parents can stay while the children are in town for treatment. And my wife she was volunteering there, and she just asked a question that seemed kind of random or innocent, like, are there any needs you see that aren't being met? And whoever was there giving her the tour said, we feel bad, but we get calls from adults quite a bit here asking if they can stay here, and we have to tell them no, because it's for children. The children have to be the patients. So I remember we were just literally later that night we were talking about it, and she just kind of randomly, flippantly mentioned that conversation, and a light bulb went off, I think in both of our heads at the same time. At that point, I had been a real estate investor, had some rental properties for about 10 years. So we both kind of thought at the same time, why don't we buy some real estate and let adults stay there? And it was fresh in our mind about Tiffany and the cancer community. So that was a spot in our hearts for that community. So that was easy. Like, we're going to buy a house, we're going to buy something, and let cancer patients stay here while they're in town for treatment, because Indianapolis is a really good, people come from all over to get treated here. So that was the idea. And it was honestly, it was real estate that helped make that possible, both from a financial standpoint, and from we didn't know anything about the hospitality industry. That was brand new to us, but I knew how to buy a house and let other people live there at that point. So that part wasn't scary. And she brought together a team of, at that point, mainly just friends, people in our lives. And we made it happen, formed the first board of directors, turned it into an official charity. And it's to date now, that was about 14 years ago, almost 14 years ago, we've served over, I think, 8,500 nights of free lodging that we've provided to our guests that have stayed there. Yeah. We have it's a 6-bedroom, 4-bath house downtown Indianapolis. Yeah. And, it's amazing thinking back to that journey, like where it came from. And it was just kind of a light bulb moment that it's been life-changing for us. But man, it's so cool to to read some of the feedback that we get from guests that say, I literally don't know what I would have done without. We've had people that were living in their cars, even in the wintertime, because they didn't, hotels are expensive. Parking downtown is expensive. Going out to restaurants 2 or 3 meals a day is expensive, right? So having some place that looks and feels like home, I think it provides a pretty good service.
Yeah, that's really cool. I always love hearing stories of, things where, people feel called to do something where they're serving others, I think just that's really what just brings joy in life is like God put something on your heart, doing something about it, making a difference in the lives of others. And it's cool that it's often something. I mean, for me, when we started Stop Slavery, it was nowhere in my wheelhouse, but I had lived overseas. So it was like, okay, like moving from Japan to Thailand, we're already 3/4 of the way there. We'll just move to a different country, even though the work was like totally outside, but it was just, a call kind of like for me, I kept praying about it. Like, hey, God, you got to end this blight on humanity. And one day I felt like God was like, well, if you want it to end, why don't you do something about it instead of just praying about it? And so I always love stories of people that have done something about it. And so, that website, if anyone wants to check it out, is Son Foundation Indy.
Yeah, it was
.org. And you could support, you could go stay there, whatever, but check that out if you have time. Anything else that you'd like to talk about the Son Foundation before we jump into real estate syndication?
Yeah. So, for us, it's just been a great experience of being able to get outside of ourselves and think outside of ourselves of other people. And, it's so much bigger than we are, like being able to provide that to people who they're at a low point, right? That's a tough season in their lives. And I hate cancer. I hate everything about it. But to be able to be just a little bit of a kind of a port in the storm for people that are going through such tough times, my heart goes out to them when I have the opportunity. I was at the house just a day or two ago, talking to a couple different guests there and hearing their stories. It could be any of us, right? So for me to think that, oh, well, that's them and I'm me, and that won't happen to me. It's just not true. Discriminate. And when it does, I don't care who you are. If you have to quit your job or your spouse has to quit a job to take care of you, or you're going to be out of town for treatment, it's going to cause some stress, emotional stress, certainly, but potentially financial stress. So that's what the Son Foundation exists to do, is to try to take at least that stressor out of people's lives a little bit so that they can focus on the most important thing, which of course is getting better.
Yeah, that's really cool. So hard transition from that. Like we could end there, but I'm personally intrigued by Onward Equity, and so just curious about what you guys do, and we talked a little bit about real estate, but then talk about syndication, how that works, what you guys do for others, and maybe even how that all started as well.
Sure. Yeah, I love talking about that as well. As I said, for 22 years now, I've been a real estate investor. Mainly had always done things on my own. My own time, my own money, my own stress, but I didn't have anyone else to answer to. But also didn't have anyone's besides. I told you my mentor. We bought some houses together, so he's been a partner. But for the most part, it's been on my own. But it was about 2016, I was introduced to the idea of being a limited partner or passive investor in larger commercial real estate deals. And another mindset, kind of mind blown time for me was even after, I thought I was a real estate investor, but after 15 years almost, I still had no idea how someone would go out and buy an apartment building, a 100 unit or 200 unit, or sometimes, 40 or 50 unit apartment building. I figured you had to be either a billionaire yourself or, it's just corporations that own these things. So I was introduced to that concept and it's called the real estate syndication, which I learned in 2016. And at that point, again, my mind was blown. I'm like, you mean I can invest my dollars, but into a real estate deal that other people are doing all the work, and I'm a CPA, so I did the math, and like I can make almost the same returns, but let everyone else or someone else do all the work. This is amazing. So that was another kind of hard fork in my mind, and started really focusing on how do I be a passive investor in some great deals, a limited partner, and I did that for 5 or 6 years, and then I would love to be on the other side of that, which is called the general partners. It's the group that does all the work, and then makes that opportunity available for other people to participate in the investment. So that's what I've been spending a lot of my time and energy on the last couple of years. Is that's where Onward Equity came from. That's my company that I focus now on trying to share with people that this opportunity even exists, because like I said, I had been a real estate investor for almost 15 years and didn't even know that existed until someone brought that to me. Everyone knows you can do stocks and bonds and mutual funds, 401ks and IRAs, but most people don't know that you can be a real estate investor without being a real estate landlord and having to do all the work yourself. A lot of people don't have the time. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the desire to take on all those roles and to deal with the stress directly. So that's what Onward Equity is for now, is to try to share with others that opportunity exists, that path exists from an investing standpoint to diversify and get some pretty nice returns as well. Projected returns, nothing's guaranteed, but it's a way to just diversify a little bit out of the standard stock market.
And when you, I know when you're doing real estate investing yourself, a lot of it, like obviously there's a return on your investment generally if things go according to plan, but you also get big tax write-offs in real estate. One of the big, reasons people jump into real estate. Do you get those as a limited partner when you're involved in a syndication deal?
Absolutely. It's one of the best reasons in my mind that real estate in general makes sense, because you just don't get tax incentives really with most any other type of investment. As a limited partner, you are an equity owner of the real estate, of the asset, whatever it is, and which means you get the full tax benefits of your share, your portion of that, of those benefits. So a lot of times in real life, what it ends up being, it feels you might be getting quarterly distributions for years, but from a tax perspective, it's going to feel like it's tax-free because you get a whole lot of depreciation. That's the magic in real estate. You get depreciation expense against your earnings. You can tell the IRS you lost money, even though money's going in your bank account every quarter.
Right.
So that's the great thing I think about it. And like I said, it can make it feel like it's tax-free income that you're getting. Now, the reality is that at some point you got to pay the piper, right? Your taxes are going to be due, but it's usually years down the road, maybe when you sell the property. And at that point, there are several things that you can do as well to kind of continue kicking that tax can down the road to continue enjoying what feels like tax-free income.
Yeah. Yeah. And we that's probably beyond the scope of this podcast to get into 1031s,
Sure.
Other things you can do to, to alleviate or, like you said, kick those things down the road. And my mind has been blown in the last few years, like being around people that are, that have, I've just learned about trusts and how, it's just crazy. Once you have a little bit of money, of how you can make it grow and, stave off taxes and some of those different things. It's kind of crazy, but that's really cool that you get that, that benefit as being part of a syndication. And, And honestly, like this actually sounds more like up my alley of rather than like getting back into the hands-on piece of doing something like this. What would be? I know you can't like say exactly like what returns are, and they're always projections. But what's some of the typical returns if you get and a syndication? It's years, right? Like you're talking 3 to 5 to 10 years. Up front you're going to be in it for a little while. What are some typical returns for investors in that?
Sure, and you're exactly right. Everyone knows. So the general partners are tasked with kind of defining the business plan, whatever that is, and then certainly presenting that to potential partners or investors up front. So everyone knows it in advance, kind of what at least the original business plan is, and it's generally like a 3 to 5 year plan or 5 to 7 year plan, something like that. And what that would look like is most likely quarterly distributions that would come out of the operating cash flows to the extent that rents exceed expenses. That would be shared with the partners, with the owners, and that includes the limited partner, passive investors. And you're right, as I said, as you said, that nothing's ever guaranteed. It's real life, so we never can know exactly what we're getting into. But if something doesn't during the underwriting process, during the diligence process, if it doesn't look like it's going to give at least roughly a 15 or 16% rate of return for investors, then it's really not even considered. It's not worth our time because we want to be able to go out there, present that to investors of, hey, this is something that is good for you in a lot of ways. It's got good returns. It's also going to diversify a little bit from what your most likely current holdings are from an investment standpoint. So overall, from a start to finish business plan, roughly say 15 to 16% average annual return over the course of that business plan is what's projected. And then from a quarterly standpoint or yearly standpoint, roughly 6 to 7%. It's called cash on cash, but it means that's the amount that you would be projected to get in cash flow on an ongoing basis. So if someone invests $100,000, in theory, they'd get roughly $6,000 to $7,000 annually in quarterly distributions. And then the biggest chunk is certainly when the biggest chunk of the return is on the back end when it's sold.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So if people are interested in learning more, they can go to onward-equity.com and I suppose connect with you on there, see how the process works. I see you wrote an ebook and some of that kind of stuff. Anything else that you'd like to say to the listeners? Just anything I didn't ask you about, or anything that you'd like to share?
I love the concept of the podcast because it's business and mission and adventure. Those are all things those are kind of my core tenets of of who I am. So they all kind of feed off of each other and make the other possible. I just think it's been great. What I do professionally is feeding the excitement that I have for being able to give back to others through the Son Foundation. That's an incredible. I think it's been a benefit to others, to the guests that we've had stay there, but it's been so beneficial for us as those on this side of running the organization. So I'd say anybody that can kind of take what they love to do and turn it into something that can benefit others as well, man, that's so powerful for all parties involved. And just to circle around to the end of the conversation, yes, Onward Equity, if anyone's interested in learning a little bit more about what that could be for them, onward-equity, like you said, .com is the website. And I did write an ebook that top 10 reasons that I think it makes sense to consider being a limited partner. And that's, if it's working correctly, that'll be a pop-up when you visit the website that'll ask if you'd like a copy of that. And I encourage people to check that out if it resonates at all with you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Scott. It was really fun having you on the podcast and opening my eyes a little bit to this limited partner investing, something I never really thought of before. But hopefully I have a problem with cash as my business continues to grow, and I need to dump it off into something like a real estate syndication. But love hearing your story about the Son Foundation and what you're doing. And thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I had a blast. Appreciate it.
BAM School, facilitating a global, self-funding, disciple-making movement through business. Thanks for tuning in to the BAM School podcast. Find show notes, free courses, resources, and more at forbam.com.